Chapter 10. The Suspect. Vassan, I probably don't have much time. Vassan looked up at the sky. His hand holding the phone against his ears was numb. He tried to hold back tears that welled in his eyes and blurred his vision.
Don't say that. You wait until I go back. Next month I'll move back home.
I don't know if I could stay until then. Ravivan spoke in a trembling voice. I'm in so much pain right now, my darling.
What about a painkiller, Mom?
It started being ineffective. Vassan closed his eyes. A single drop of tear streaked down his cheek.
Please, have Thong tell the doctors to adjust the medicine for you.
Vassan. She paused for a few seconds. If I'm gone before you come back, you don't have to be sad. If I'm gone, it means that it's my own decision. Please respect my decision. The first thing Vassan heard when he came back to his senses was a constant beeping sound from a device above his head, followed by someone's footsteps walking by. His eyelashes began to flutter before he slowly opened his eyes. Vassan felt that his body was so heavy. He was gradually regaining his consciousness. Vassan spent several seconds to determine where he was and how he ended up like this, but he couldn't find the right answer. His right hand could feel a warm touch that wrapped around it tightly. He looked down at the hand before looking up to see a man's cheerful face plastered with a big smile.
Vassan!
Gunn held Vassan's hand with both of his before lifting and kissing it on the back. He put Vassan's hand on his face as he finally got his precious back.
Finally, you woke up. I worried sick about you.
Vassan closed his eyes and turned away from the light above the ceiling. His sense began to return to its full function. He could sense chaotic atmosphere around him with the constant sound of hospital stretchers' wheels. Vassan's left joint was connected to an IV line. Moreover, he felt that there was a nasal cannula under his nose. Vassan realized that something serious must have happened to him.
Where am I?
Vassan turned to ask the man standing by his bed. He knew that this question seemed funny, but as a man who just regained his consciousness, this confusion was too overwhelming. Then he could find answers on his own.
At the hospital. Right now you're in the emergency room.
Gunn stroked Vassan's head gently.
I'll call a duty doctor. Be right back.
Despite his lingering confusion, Vassan tried to regain his composure and recall the incident that brought him here. Perhaps the more suitable question was, what was going on? Gunn walked back in with a female physician. She checked his vital signs before walking to the bedside. How do you feel right now?
It's somewhat half dream, half reality.
Vassan eyed her.
What happened to me, doctor? Your brother came home and found you lying unconscious on the floor.
Gunn was the one who answered.
You were found semi-conscious, sleepy, yet responsive, so your brother called the ambulance and brought you here. Can you remember what happened before that?
Vassan shut his eyes tightly, massaging his tired eyes.
Someone broke into my house and tried to assault me. That's all I can remember.
Vassan heard Gunn let out a curse. He seemed utterly furious, while the female physician was surprised in response to Vassan's story. Watching Gunn's current reaction made Vassan feel strangely relieved, for he knew that there were someone ready to fight against this ordeal alongside him.
That's exactly what I suspected. My boyfriend must have been drugged.
Gunn glanced at Vassan.
Did the man who attacked you force you to take or inject you with something? Wait, who's your boyfriend?
Vassan wanted to oppose him badly, but he didn't have enough strength. The female physician looked at Gunn, startled, which Vassan wasn't surprised at all why she acted that way. Vasan tried to recall the incident. He remembered that Thongkom and Guy went out to buy some groceries at the department store. He continued working for a while and went to the kitchen. Then someone sneaked up on him and hooked his arm around his neck. He felt an instant stinging pain in his buttock. After that, Vasan's memory sunk into the sea of fog. The only thing left was numbing pain, like someone slapped his left buttock.
I think he injected some drug into my butt.
Vasan's answer made both physicians' eyes widen, and then the two looked at each other. He must have been injected by IM method, Gunn.
I think so.
Gunn pointed at the nurse station.
We'd better report to the police. Tell them that Inspector Vasan was assaulted in his home and was still under observation at the emergency room.
I'll call them, Gunn. The female physician quickly walked towards the nurse station to use the phone. Gunn turned back to grab Vasan's hand, shamelessly holding it in his palms for a second time.
Where's my brother? Your brother and sister-in-law were waiting for you in front of the emergency room.
Gunn replied.
It's fortunate that they came back before the intruder could do anything further to you. Your clothes were still tidy and there's no traces of injuries. You mentioned the clothes. Are you worried that I was going to be raped? Of course I am. You're mine. If someone is going to force himself on you, I'll kill him. I belong to no one.
Gunn smiled slightly before his face became serious.
Did you remember the intruder's face?
Vasan tried to squeeze out every drop of his remaining memory.
Aside from remembering that someone was choking me and we probably got into a fight, I can't remember anything after that.
Gunn was in deep thoughts.
It must be the effect of the drug he gave you. I didn't know if the intruder wanted to rob you or kill you. If it's the latter, the intruder might want to make you unconscious before he murdered you and tried to cover it up. However, he failed because your brother got home first.
Vasan noticed something in Gunn's gaze.
Seems like you know something.
Gunn looked at Vasan with his usual unreadable gaze.
I know what you know. You get some rest. No need to worry about other things. I'll take care of everything.
Even if Vasan was grateful that there was a man who determined to do so much for him, a sense of hesitation prevented him from being completely joyful. Gunn was always a man full of secrets, and it made Vasan unable to reach this man completely. It was why he hadn't opened up his heart 100%. He was afraid that there would be an unexpected turn between them, and scared that the secret Gunn refused to reveal would hurt him the most. The intruder must have been pharmacist Booze. The drug Gunn saw when he broke into Booze's residence must be the same as the one injected into Vasan. After he admitted Vasan to the male medical ward to be under observation, he walked back to the residence behind the hospital and watched pharmacist Booze's residence that was still dark. No matter how much Gunn wanted to tell the police that the suspect might be pharmacist Booze, he couldn't. What he told them would definitely lead to the question of how Gunn obtained this information. The fact that he had broken into pharmacist Booze's house and found the evidence without any authority wasn't such a good answer to give to the police. If the intruder hadn't left any traces for the police, Gunn might have come up with some plans to get the police's attention to pharmacist Booze. Then, Vasan's case would be solved as well as the terminal patient's cases. He didn't know if the fact that the pharmacist possessed intravenous sedative had anything to do with the patient's death. But if the police aimed their target here, they might be able to find the answer. The next morning, Gunn visited Vasan with an overly large bouquet of red roses. Vasan in green patient uniform was shocked with the gift that stole the spotlight from other presents in the male medical ward. The bouquet was placed on Vasan's bedside table. Even a male patient next to him turned to stare at him.
Bring it out of here,
Vasan whispered with a menacing tone. but Gunn simply ignored the request. He deliberately took Vassan's hand in his, but Vassan swiftly pulled his hand back and glanced at the nurses, who started gossiping.
"How are you feeling? Still drowsy? You no longer need oxygen supplies. It means you're okay."
Vassan glared daggers at him. He acted like a tabby cat that was hissing and had an erected fur.
"Why are you here? I'll call my brother to chase you away." "I'm here to visit my boyfriend. Besides, I work here. No one can chase me out."
Gunn spoke in a deadpan. Vassan let out a long sigh and averted his gaze somewhere else helplessly. Without the wooden rail, he would have jumped out of bed and run away. Gunn laughed softly after seeing Vassan's reaction. He was so adorable, contrasted to his tough appearance.
"I did this because telling them that you're my boyfriend was the only way to explain why I had called you during the incident. There weren't so many reasons to explain why I'd be able to call an officer in the middle of the night. Tell them we're close friends. A close friend wouldn't send heart icons to each other 24/7. Only you who send those things. Even though you're feeling unwell, you still tirelessly argue with me."
Gunn turned to look at a saline bottle.
"Has more memory returned? I also remember that the guy was all in black and wore a balaclava. He was taller than me, might be even taller than you."
Vassan took a glance at the flowers on the table.
"You should go back to work. Leave this business to my colleagues. Today, almost every officer from my station would come to visit me as well as the officer responsible for the case." "Sure. I hope you'll be out of the hospital today, so I can take you to dinner as a consolation."
Gunn smiled gently.
"Don't forget to tell other officers that you're my boyfriend." "I'm not your boyfriend. Go away."
Despite the unpleasant words that poured from his mouth, Vassan's eyes were constantly fixed on the roses. Gunn squeezed Vassan's arm lightly and walked out amid the eyes of the nurses in the ward. Today he had to work at the hospital. If there was no visiting case after that, he would clear his patient queues and come back to investigate pharmacist booze at the pharmacy room. If luck was on his side and Vassan hit hard enough, there must be some bruises on Booze's body. Gunn was positive that a strong man like Vassan must have left some damages on his assailant. "Pharmacist Booze is absent today, too. We couldn't contact him. Maybe he's still sick," the female pharmacist told Gunn when he came to ask for Pharmacist Booze again. He walked out of the pharmacy room full of doubt. The man has been missing for 2 days in a row. How could he not be suspicious? Gunn planned to break into Pharmacist Booze's residence again to see if there were more evidence he could find, or if there was any indication of where he might be.
"The police are all over the place."
3 rescuers in yellow uniforms were talking at the hallway in front of the psychiatric department.
"Duh, I heard Inspector Vassan was hospitalized."
A local celebrity, huh, Vassan? Gunn smiled slightly and walked by, ignoring them. "No, they didn't gather in the ward. The police are all gathered at the residence behind the hospital, man." Gunn halted. "Like they're going to search the house."
"Whose house?"
"Someone said it's Pharmacist Booze's house." Gunn took a deep breath and slowly let it out. A smile on his face grew wider. Sometimes he was worrying for nothing. Vassan was one of the best police officers. No wonder he came to the right conclusion. Vassan must have suspected Pharmacist Booze no less than he did. Gunn was glad that the police suspected Pharmacist Booze without needing so much of his help. When they found the evidence, not only Vassan's case would end, it might also lead to those final stage patients' unsolved cases. Gunn only hoped that he didn't leave any traces when he broke into that house. Well, he was sure that he hadn't.
The Grim Reaper in white, the Grim Reaper in white roaming in this hospital. There's the Grim Reaper in white. The voice of the patient, who kept repeating the same things over and over in the therapy room, started to make the nurses who escorted him here feel uneasy. Even if they knew that Sam, the patient who was sent by the police for rehabilitation, was diagnosed with a mental disorder caused by using narcotic drugs. The fact that this patient was constantly talking nonsense about death sparked fears to people who overheard such things.
"Sam, stay still. You'll fall off the chair."
A nurse tapped the patient's back as he kept rocking back and forth like he was unable to control himself. She really hoped a psychiatrist would arrive soon. "It's this place. The Grim Reaper's here." Sam looked at the nurse. "It took the sick lives." The nurse smiled patiently.
"It's a normal thing here. Patients die all the time."
"I saw the Grim Reaper." Sam stopped rocking himself, his gaze absently wandering far away. "The Grim Reaper wore black at night but white during sunlight. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. The Black Grim Reaper went into people's houses, sucking out the souls of sick people and left. After that, I heard his voice, telling me to slaughter those animals as the Grim Reaper's offerings." The nurse shook her head slightly at Sam's nonsense babbling. She'd been encountering with this kind of nonsense because the patients with psychiatric problems usually had hallucinations. If they couldn't distinguish fantasy from reality, they would believe in what they saw.
"People who wore white in this place were only doctors and nurses. All people here wanted to save the patient, Sam. You don't have to be afraid."
"The Grim Reaper in white! The Grim Reaper in white!" Sam repeated the same sentence when Dr. Kanakpon, a female psychiatrist, opened a door into the single therapy room. "He still talks about the Grim Reaper, Pla?"
"Yes, Professor Pang,"
the nurse replied.
"I start to get goosebumps."
"It's okay. I'll try to find the cause of his hallucination about the Grim Reaper, to have more effective treatment. It might relate to an incident in his past. Thank you, Pla, for bringing him in." Pla nodded slightly.
"Call me if you need anything,"
and then walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly open. "Not a hallucination. Grim Reaper in white. I did saw him." Dr. Kanakpon smiled gently. "I believe that you did see him, because you aren't well, Sam. Unlike other people, there's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Shall we talk about the Grim Reaper today?" "Seems like a lock at the back door was broken. Lieutenant Ball, we can go in this way." The police officer grabbed the doorknob at the back door, which had not been locked from the inside, allowing them to easily enter the residence. "Everyone, this way." Lieutenant Ball called his colleagues to take a detour to the back of the hospital staff residence belonging to Mr. Chanchai, or Pharmacist Booth. This search was based on a warrant from the court. Inspector Vassan, who was a victim, reported that Pharmacist Booth was a suspect in the assault. However, the police couldn't contact the pharmacist, and he coincidentally took continuous sick leave, which seemed so suspicious. Searching the house would give them additional evidence, such as the drug used during the assault. The officer asked 2 people to be witnesses in this search. They were Dr. Somsak, the hospital director, and Mrs. Prani, a registered nurse. "Is the back door broken?" Dr. Somsak was surprised before he quickly followed the police. 2 police officers and the witnesses took a detour to the back door, which could be opened with ease. Dr. Somsak shook his head, watching the whole incident with disbelief before turning to look at Prani. "I've been here for 20 years. This is the first time the police searched through the staff residence."
"It's necessary, Director. If they find nothing, Pharmacist Boos might not be a suspect.
But Inspector Vassan clearly identified Pharmacist Boos and he's absent. We're unable to contact him at all. I think it truly is fishy.
Director, if it's really Pharmacist Boos, I don't know why on earth he would do such a thing. Attacking the police like that?
Samsak let out his breath. We wouldn't know until he tells us himself.
2 police officers had entered the house. Samsak and Prani hesitated for a moment before deciding to follow them. Only milliseconds that Samsak stepped inside the house, he heard the police officer who had led their way cursed out loud.
Fuck.
Samsak widened his eyes in alarm. He was uncertain whether he should go inside or retreat for now. Another police officer ran past him to the room in the middle of the house, near the kitchen where the noises came from. The police promptly reported what they'd found through radio communication. Samsak carefully walked in to see what was happening, and then the scene before him made his blood run cold. In the middle of the house, where all the doors and windows were tightly shut, that no light could get through, a body was found, dangling from the side of the stairway. Underneath the body's feet was a plastic chair lying on its side. Samsak tried to gather his courage to look up at the face of this dangling body. The face was ash white, lips were deep green, tongue sticking out, but there was still an outline that could determine the identity of the person.
Oh!
Prani followed him in. Looked like she was going to be sick when she saw a grotesque scene before her. Dr. Samsak swiftly turned to hold her and rushed out of the crime scene.